Like to kick off today's presentation with Bill Saltmarsh from Children's Mercy. He's Chief Data Officer there, and they have a number of innovative programs going on within data and within patient monitoring. And so I'd like to invite him to tell us a bit about that. Bill?
Thank you, John. And again, thanks for inviting me and having me for this discussion. I'm looking forward to it. So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about specifically our patient progression hub that launched this past year in partnership with GE Health and Children's Mercy. I'm going to pull up a slide deck, and hopefully there'll be useful slides as I talk through it here. Give me one moment here.
Looks good.
Okay. All right, so yes, we can talk about AI in general, or we can talk about it specifically relative to Patient Progression Hub. I'm choosing the latter this morning, and I'll touch on kind of the bigger picture as we build out not only the Patient Progression Hub as a set of solutions for our patients, but also how we're planning on leveraging artificial intelligence across the institution, and how we're planning to balance the need for governance alongside innovation. So we get rolling. So as I mentioned, this launched, the Patient Progression Hub launched in, I believe it was April, was ribbon cutting here at Children's Mercy. You'll see a bunch of our VIPs here cutting the proverbial ribbon. But in the background, you see what looks like a command center, and that's what it really was modeled after. GE Health is partnered with other health institutions around the country in establishing a patient progression command center of sorts. And Children's Mercy was the first pediatric hospital to build such a command center. And we're very proud of the iterative progress that we're making, as it's a highly complex, as you can imagine, endeavor for us, as it's inherently cross-functional across the hospital. And we're looking to include as much relevant information and data at any given moment about our patients and about our operations to help facilitate discharges and facilitate better patient experiences in general. To kind of zoom out on what the Patient Progression Hub intends to be for us, and these aren't novel concepts by any stretch in terms of how a hospital might think about creating value for patients, but this is what we thought about in terms of centering on what we're trying to create from an outcome perspective with our Patient Progression Hub. I'll start at the top and kind of go clockwise. Care team collaboration, I mentioned this is inherently cross-functional for us. The underlying principle here that we're trying to follow here is improved access to inpatient care. And I'll get into a little detail on the next slide about kind of the challenge relative to that. Refined patient flow, reduction of inefficient processes and avoidable delays, better use of data to anticipate coordinated care, right? We were talking about putting the right information in the right brains at the right time in order to facilitate better outcomes. And so that's what we think about. And then better outcomes, obviously, for our patients and our families. All of this is meant to create efficiencies in the patient experience. And
improved in party this morning, so we should begin.
Got him. Your question?
Mm-hmm.
No question. All right. So this is, I want to kind of zoom out on the challenge here. So we have kind of three pathways to getting to an inpatient experience for our patients. Primarily, they go through our emergency department, which is probably no surprise to all of you. That is the volume, the preponderance of our patients start in the emergency department. They also come through peri-op as well as through direct admission. And you can see that as a patient goes through the process of becoming a patient at the hospital longer term, there are various stops along the way. And that means that there are various workflows, various staff members, various departments that need to be coordinated appropriately. And so this was the kind of the bigger picture challenge that we were trying to address relative to the Patient Progression Hub. And this was a fun little sketch that we put together probably about a year and a half ago at this point, as we're kind of visioning on what this looks like. And this is obviously an eye chart. You don't need to consume any of this at any level, really. But what this is really saying is that there's so much that we're trying to create from an outcome perspective, and there are so many inputs and outputs associated with those outcomes. And it's just a very complicated long-term endeavor for us, but it's all focused on facilitating and expediting and improving the quality of our patients' experience. I won't read this verbatim, but what we really want to focus on here in terms of the vision, this is the stated vision for patient progression for us. But I sort of emphasizing the maximizing the use of data. And data, we like to think of data not as bits and bytes and visualizations and data model, but we think about it just in terms of information. And like I mentioned earlier, when we're talking about building the right patient progression experience for our patients and connected care experience for our patients, what we're really thinking about is what is the right salient, timely information that we can put in the right hands at the right time in order to facilitate good outcomes. So kind of zooming in a little bit on where we are now, and these are two of the modules that we built thus far. One's called a capacity expediter, and you can think of this as sort of, this is focused on our operations as a hospital. And then on the right, is our patient manager, which is really focused on the patients itself, right? So on the left, where we're trying to identify in real time, if not predictive, is capacity levels across the hospital broken down by unit, tracking things like beds and confirmed and potential discharges, meaning we're getting to predictive insights there, as well as any other associated tasks. And it's all about the patient. So as we go to the right here, we're looking at real-time awareness of how our patients are progressing through the hospital, through their experience, trying to facilitate the right handoffs at the right time. And in the means to achieve those ends is by providing information that's appropriate, that may affect the handoff between caregivers. Things like health equity risks or readmission potential or sepsis detection, all of these. There's so much to mention, but those are just a few of the attributes that are potentially associated with a given patient, and those would affect obviously the experience and how we would approach that patient. If I kind of take a step back and kind of try to contextualize this within the AI context. So the Patient Progression Hub has relatively rudimentary descriptive analytics. It also has the ability to provide predictive and prescriptive guidance for us. Where we are in terms of our build out and our journey with progression is we're looking at leveraging augmented intelligence. So if you think about the human machine intelligence continuum, this is pulled from Dr. Anthony Chang's book from a few years ago, this framework, but the continuum here is from assisted intelligence to autonomous intelligence. And we're trying to sit in the middle where we're trying to improve and make more common an interaction between human and machine. And in this case, what we're trying to predict is bed capacity, trying to predict potential candidates to move from our different ICUs, trying to predict risk for specific patients that would trigger staff reaction and workflows, and then identify patients with potential health equity concerns, as I mentioned before. And so this is really about augmented intelligence. We have a human in the loop at every step of the way, and this is about getting the right, better information forward to that human so they can make better decisions. And I mentioned, we are if you look at the command center, our patient progression hub, you'll see screens that are just basic kind of just counts of beds and just straightforward mathematics, right? But then you'll also have predictive insights based on algorithmic development. And again, this is just to contextualize where we are in our journey on the analytic continuum, everywhere from on the left, descriptive to cognitive. We're trying, again, just be better at predicting potential outcomes, probability of outcomes, and moving forward accordingly with our clinical staff. But if you think about it, that's just the beginning. And so we're wrapping up phase 1 here now with Patient Progression Hub, and this is a multi-year journey and hopefully for a long time as we iterate on this and improve upon it. But you can just start to think about some of the other use cases and examples where we'll use data and information to drive better patient outcomes, things like census and staffing forecasts, predicting surgical capacity to make sure that we have the right block utilization on our calendar, and getting patients in when they need treatment and when they need to be seen. And then patient placement, ensuring patients get placed appropriately based on their very specific condition and attributes, not only helps the patient, but it also helps us as a hospital, especially in times like now where we're in viral season and demand clearly outweighs the supply sometimes of staff and resourcing, and appropriately placing patients where they should go, and in their experience in the hospital as quickly as possible is going to help us prioritize in contexts like that. And again, this is not specific to healthcare or Children's Mercy at all. And this is probably a familiar framework or kind of model, but I just want to kind of like for folks that don't have the context on what machine learning is or artificial intelligence is, and this is especially important relative to managing risk in healthcare associated with such innovation. On the left, this is just kind of contextualize, give everybody up to the same level of sort of the mental model. On the left, you have traditional programming, where you have the inputs and the rules go into a machine, go into a computer, and out comes output, right? That's traditional programming. And on the right is where we think about when this is an overgeneralization, admittedly, but again, just to kind of get folks up to speed. For machine learning, we're talking about putting input and output into a machine, into the computer, into the algorithm, and the rules come out of that based on machine learning. So you end up with novel rules, novel data associated with a given context by using machine learning. And so that gets into how we think about balancing the risks and benefits of such an approach. Algorithmic decision-making inherently moves the locus of control and invites non-trivial complexity. So what I mean by that is if you have a clinician who is identifying a potential issue in an X-ray, and without the use of machine learning or technology, then as compared to using an algorithm to identify it, if you do not have a human in the loop and you're just using the algorithm to determine the associated condition with that X-ray, then you are moving the locus of control or decision-making from the clinician itself to the model, right? So there's ethical considerations, but there's also adoption and accountability considerations as we start to use more and more of these tools in the clinical workflow, and the design of that workflow is also a non-trivial consideration as well. Generative AI, just to speak to that a little bit, creates novel data inherently, so that also needs to be managed. So if you think about if you look at using generative AI technology to identify medical coding within unstructured text data, you're trying to extract that data and make sense of it and kind of create a structured version of it. And so you're creating novel data from unstructured data. So that inherently needs to be managed. So it's a benefit, I think, is a net positive, but it's also something to be considered, especially for someone like myself who manages the data governance side of things. The value of solutions is highly dependent upon the quality of underlying data. So that's not specific to machine learning and artificial intelligence. That's always been true for everything relative to analytics. Monitoring models is a non-trivial effort, especially on the clinical side, and explainability can be harder to achieve when you're using machine learning algorithms, and failing to meet the bar of explainability, especially for folks in clinical roles, can diminish the trust in a given solution. Specific to Children's Mercy and what we're thinking about and doing relative to the future of artificial intelligence here is we've created we have an ongoing effort with an AI task force, which includes our chief strategy officer, chief marketing officer, chief people officer, our CIO, folks in the clinical side as well, and myself. And what we're trying to do there is seed ideation and experimentation in lower risk domains of the hospital, and also start to create a little bit more formal governance that is specific to AI enabled solutions, whether they're bought and procured or built in-house. Another thing that the task force is working on in partnership with the Center for Practical Bioethics here in Kansas City is devising a transparency statement. What we'd like to do is be upfront about our use of innovative technologies such as artificial intelligence, potentially in the course of the patient experience, and be open and transparent about the use of that, and provide some reassurance that we are balancing the potential positive outcomes with potential ethical or risk considerations as well. And we think that, you know, putting together a publicly facing for our community, our patients, their families, putting together a statement that says that we are using these things puts us on our front foot relative to other healthcare institutions. And you know, I think that's based on what we understand to be the sentiment in our community. We think that's going to be beneficial for our folks that we serve. We're also working on, like I said, an AI-specific governance framework. We have a larger enterprise data management framework and data governance committees. We are trying to incorporate and build out AI-specific controls and standards. We are building our AI strategy into our larger Children's Mercy data strategy, and trying to put a little bit finer point on what that means for our stakeholders, our team members here. As I mentioned, we're looking at experimentation in lower risk domains of the hospital. One of the things that we've looked at already is echo detection for cardiology to assist our clinicians in reading echocardiogram. You know, that's just one example. And we believe that if we put a human in the loop, it's a net positive for all. AI is a facilitator for the enterprise data management. What we think about here is that we have so much unstructured text as a healthcare institution. We think that large language models can be a real benefit to us in terms of creating structure out of unstructured data. And we're looking forward to the benefits of that. And another partnership effort here, again, this is Center for Practical Bioethics that we've had on site and are continue working with, is we're building an ethical risk typology for Children's Mercy. And what we're trying to do is identify the risk stratification associated with implementing AI-related solutions across different contexts. So, for example, you might have a solution for a natural language processing system for summarizing clinical encounters. And in that case, it touches on the clinical context, it touches on clinical documentation, so it's patient-facing, it involves a neural network, so it's a bit of a black box, it's generative AI potentially, and so that may have a higher risk quotient. Whereas if you're thinking about using artificial intelligence, machine learning to build a custom model that's developed in-house, specific to a research study, the risk is really less in general, because it's not patient-facing and it's not associated with a neural network necessarily, though it could be. So things like that, where we're trying to identify potential risk associated with these solutions and the implementation of them across different contexts in the hospital, will help us activate specific standards and controls accordingly. This is the future, quote unquote. This is an image that is generated from DALL-E. So it's not really children. It kind of looks like a hospital in the background, looks nothing like the Kansas City Children's Mercy Hospital. If you look at the child, quote unquote, they have 5 or 6 or maybe 7 fingers on their left hand. So, you know, AI, the point here is that AI is an awesome opportunity for all of us, but there is some risk in terms of the real world application of it thus far. So there's that, but this is a real child, and I'm gonna do what I always do when I get a chance to talk to an external audience, is give a shameless plug for Children's Mercy and ask again shamelessly for your help. So we have a philanthropy arm here. So there are many ways to give to Children's Mercy. We are a nonprofit freestanding pediatric hospital, and in the top 10 of U.S. News and World Report pediatric hospitals across a variety of different domains. So we can't do what we do without your help. So that's my talk for today. I appreciate your engagement and your attendance here. So
Well, thank you, Bill. That was great. I I might kick off our questions just to ask, how do you what's kind of the staffing profile for the center?
for the patient progression hub,
Yes.
the staffing profile, meaning like what's this? You're asking how many folks are stationed there, or?
Yeah, and their backgrounds.
Yeah, so it's focused on a variety of different clinical units. There are at any given time 15 to 30 folks in that are seated in the patient progression hub. There are operational folks. There are folks that monitor the weather and logistics of moving ambulances and vehicles, emergency vehicles, identifying capacity at any given time. And then there are folks that look at the patient-specific tiles, and so you'll have nurses and sometimes physicians, emergency department staff, that are it varies from time to time depending upon what's going on in the hospital. But it's pretty there are a myriad of folks from across the hospital.
What would be the balance between technical and clinical of the staff?
Oh, it's far more clinical. Yeah, so that's a great question. So this is not an IT solution. This is a hospital solution, right? So it's meant to abstract all complexity to provide the right information at the right time. So folks who are used to looking at their own private PC, looking at data points associated with their patients are very comfortable in this context and setting. It's not meant to be a bunch of folks that are tweaking algorithms or what have you.
Right. Other questions from the team? Elizabeth.
Yeah,
Hi.
I have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. What a wonderful presentation. One comment is your progression hub looks like NASA Space Center, which I think is exactly what you want it to look like, since you're taking this on. You talk about looking back at that, what I call your traffic jam slide, going back in the beginning, which is humorous, but nevertheless impactful. As you work through your priorities, or your list of things to do, are you going to be publishing outcomes for each I would suppose milestones that you're setting within this very long and rather complex journey that you're going on, and how will you share those with the outside world?
That's an excellent question. I don't have a good answer, frankly. I'm not the executive sponsor, so I don't know specifically why how we're looking at share. I mean, healthcare is inherently an open source context, right? And so we want to be able to benefit everybody and not just Children's Mercy and our patients. And so I don't have a good answer for you at the moment, but I'm sure that we have some vehicle that we're looking at sharing those insights.
Yeah, because nationally, childcare has to improve dramatically, across our whole nation.
Yes.
So, as a center of excellence, which is what Children's Mercy is, to be able to share, the positive outcomes that will influence, the rest of our society would be just terrific.
Yeah, that's always our underlying intention. I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure that there is something that we've talked about. I just haven't been in those conversations, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Tappan? Tappan, did you have a question? I guess we'll move to Dr. Ader.
Yes, hi, Bill. This is a great application. I think you alluded to it, but the trust and transparency. Can you speak a little bit about that and how you have feedback to your systems? And I'm a clinician, so interested in that. But can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a few different angles to come at that from. One is when you're using something like a neural network to devise an algorithm that creates an output based on a set of logic that the algorithm produces. doctors and clinicians in general are inherently very curious folks. They would like to know how a certain outcome has been produced. And so if we're not prepared to provide that explainability, then that can be troublesome. The other side of this is that there are very real human resources implications associated with some of, if in fact these AI enabled solutions gain more traction in healthcare, there are human resources implications associated with that, right? And I think that we need to be prepared to have those conversations as an institution, but also as an industry, so we can guide the future education of folks that are required in hospitals and healthcare institutions, but also just we can have honest, candid conversations about how we're trying to create efficiency through means other than hiring more folks.
Do we have other questions from the team?
Yeah, I had a quick question. Just happened. Sorry, I was talking on mute earlier.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, wonderful presentation, and thank you for taking the time. I was curious. You have a very progressive roadmap of machine learning and LLM-driven solutions ahead of you. Wondering if you guys have been developing everything in-house. Have you considered outside partners? What's your trajectory like in terms of ongoing plan?
We have and will consider outside partners. Up to this point, for patient progression, that specific application, it has been in-house. We have a data science team that is capable of building statistical models that iterate into software and integration into this application. So we're leveraging that expertise in-house. But as we get successful, there will be more demand for these types of solutions across different contexts. And so, yeah, we will need to figure out how to execute that.
Wonderful.
Bill, you had mentioned ethics as being a key element of what goes on here. Could you maybe say a little bit more about the risk and upside as well of the ethical equation?
Yeah, certainly. I mentioned our partnership with the Center for Practical Bioethics, which has an AI-focused program that we've partnered with, but they've been around for a lot longer than AI has been a salient topic for us. What we're trying to do is kind of create a little bit of we're trying to create a framework around assessing risk, but we're also trying to bias towards action and try to move fast on evaluating AI-related solutions. Because the truth of it is every vendor that we are engaged with already or soon to be has their own set of AI features, AI-enabled features and tools. And so they're coming at our leaders, our decision makers, our frankly, our buyers from all directions. And what we're trying to do is educate, kind of create an AI literacy program here, educate our leaders so that when they go into conversations with these vendors, that they can assess these tools independently, obviously bring them back to the centralized governance framework that we're creating as well. But we're trying to create a general awareness for our leadership about the potential ethical implications. One example is, there are several solutions, I'm not going to name any by name, but there are several solutions out there that help with recruiting, right? And recruiting is obviously a challenge for hospitals, both on the clinical side and non-clinical side, especially for high impact positions that have rare top candidates. It's challenging to bring in an AI related solution for that without understanding the implications of what goes into the candidate pool by using an algorithmic solution. So for example, if you are using it to look for LinkedIn profiles, LinkedIn has in the past had known biases about how they engage with recruiters, who recruits, who engages with those recruiters. And if we're specifically using that as an input into our talent pool, then we have to understand that what are we missing from that candidate pool by using that as a source. Again, there's a variety of different contexts, but there are ethical implications everywhere. And I think it's just important to kind of talk about them. Because what we're doing when we're inviting artificial intelligence is we're expediting decision-making. I kind of think of it that way, just it's an oversimplification, is what we're trying to do is we're trying to make a better decision quicker. And in doing that, you may be overlooking how those inputs get translated into outputs.
Thank you. Other questions on the team? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Bill, I'm playing in the pharmacogenomics space right now. So with PGX, I know Children's Mercy's had done some work in the past, continues to. But as you talk about cross-functional and coordinated care, is that something that's being incorporated into your data model?
Yes, absolutely. We have a coordinated care department, set of leaders that are intimately involved in the patient progression hub. It is the underpinning of the operational workflow.
But as far as the pharmacogenomics component of it and the aspect of optimizing prescription medications, is that also being included?
It has not been in phase 1, but it is on the roadmap.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Hey, John, this is Dick. I would just comment, first off, I really appreciate, Bill, you taking us through the primer on machine learning and math and generative. I think I understand that reasonably well, but I love it when someone comes up with a simple summary and then shows the progression. So keep doing that. I think for all of us, I'm on calls all the time where people are confusing good old-fashioned math and Boolean logic with generative AI. So really important to keep our literacy high on that. And secondly, I think your shout out for the Center for Practical Bioethics, and there are several people on this call today that are part of that task force, and we work closely with Dr. Mark Hoffman at your place and others. And both KU and Children's Mercy have really stepped up to help refine this work. And each institution is actually taking a piece of kind of the go forward approach. And I think this risk matrix, or this scoring of things, I think that's innovative work. It's what puts the practical in the Center for Practical Bioethics. And I really appreciate it. It's one of the key things we sell in this region, is that we actually have an initiative that's community-based with academic and healthcare partners. So I appreciate the shout out there. And for those of you on the call that continue to work on some of this, thanks for that commitment. So well done.
Yeah, we really loved our relationship with them. And like you said, Mark Hoffman's been quite involved with them for a while. We were really benefiting from the partnership.
Great. Thanks, John.
Sure. With that, I think we'll just say thank you, Bill. That was really insightful.
Hey, John, can I just ask one question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dan. Go ahead, please.
My raised hand may have been hidden away. Just a quick question, Bill, because I sort of very good presentation. I echo everybody else's comments. And as Kat shared with you, the Kansas City Health Collaborative, on whose board Luke Harris sits, one of your colleagues, who's been really a great asset. You guys are a bunch of smart dudes. One of the things we've talked about as we build out a community information sort of exchange here in town, and John and I have talked about this, is getting community input. And so as you all have been building this out, and I may have missed this in the presentation, how much input did you have from patients or from community? Because it seems to me as there's the trust level you talked about is both internal and external, that getting folks internally to trust that this is something that they can rely on with a level of confidence. But the other part is, as you roll this out and let patients know and let parents know, we're going to be using AI to treat your baby. It seems to me that if that's not properly contextualized, that could go in a number of different ways.
It's great question, and really good points. So we have a variety of means by which we engage with the community at all times. one of which is our patient family advisory councils. We have a variety of them across different domains for the hospital. So we're always engaging with anything that is patient facing. We're always engaging with those folks. I mentioned the transparency statement that we want to produce, that we're wordsmithing actively. One of the things that we've talked about relative to that is we think that the transparency is going to be helpful. And we also want to be upfront that we can't always tell you exactly when AI specifically is involved in the patient experience. I think this is going to be, it's an interesting and thorny subject. We would love to be upfront as if it's involved in the decision making about a patient and the treatment that they receive, the prognosis, diagnosis rather. That's one thing. But if you're talking about the systems that house patient data, that's a harder nut for us to crack in terms of identifying if in fact like AI is used in any of it. And it's almost inconsequential to the patient, but it's important for us to kind of be upfront and say, when possible, we are going to disclose these things. But yeah, and to more to your point, to your question, we have constant engagement with the community to make sure that what we're doing is actually meeting the needs of our community and not just a guess, sticking our finger in the air and seeing which way the wind's blowing.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Again, thanks so much for leading us through that. It's such a great project, and as Dick indicated, very edifying. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks, John.
We have had a few people join us since we kicked off, so I'd like to give them a chance to say hi, if we could. Is Brandy still with us?
I am. Hi, I'm Dr. Brandy RT, founder at Ask Sammy.
Great, thanks for joining. Steve Kropp?
You bet. Thanks, John. Steve Kropp. I'm the director of telehealth at the University of Kansas Health System.
Allison?
Good morning. I'm Allison Troutwine. I work at University Health Truman Medical Centers. I'm part of the UMKC Health Sciences District.
Great. Brent? Brent, you still with us? Go then to Dr. Fitzmaurice.
Good morning. I'm Laura Fitzmaurice. I'm the Chief Health Informatics Officer at Children's Mercy.
Thank you. Anurag?
Good morning, all. My name is Anurag Patel. I'm CEO, founder of Avada Health, and work here on the innovations or health innovation team.
Great, thanks. Is there anybody that I've missed?
Aaron Deacon with Casey Digital Drive.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our second presenter today, Dr. Harvey Castro. Dr. Castro is really a known quantity in AI across the country and probably internationally. He's an author of several books and is now leading a very innovative program at the University of Texas. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Castro and have him say a little bit more about his background and tell us more about AI.
Well, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay, awesome. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. Thank you, Doug, for inviting me. I really appreciate the group. Love what different parts of the world are doing in this space. I'll share my slides in a second, but just a quick summary about me. I'm an ER doctor by training, over 20 years experience. I've been blessed in that I've been also an administrator for a hospital system that I created and sold. So I'm really intricate and involved in managing doctors, having my own staffing company, having my own billing company. And then now that AI came out, it's been really fun. So let me grab the share screen. There it is. And let me share my PowerPoint. All right. And I need to figure out like a fast button. All right. So hopefully, and let me just make sure you guys can see this well. I'll hit this. Can you guys see it okay?
We're seeing the presentation mode with the
notes.
Yes.
Oh.
Or with the
slide sorter. Yeah, with the on the left.
Oh yeah. Okay, let me just activate it. Okay, good. Slideshow beginning. Come on. So you'd think I'd have an AI ready to go on the side. Sorry. Let me take the view. I would think, isn't it normal view or slide mat now?
It's still showing the sort of
The
on the left.
side. Yeah, yeah. Let me just hit resume slideshow. Okay, that maybe, can you see it now? Are you still seeing?
We can still see it. It's just a little bit
Yeah,
small.
yeah, I apologize. These are actually, it's gonna be a practice run anyway. I took some of my slides for HIMSS that I'm presenting next week and we'll get going. So let me start with, a lot of you guys already heard about this. The boy that had seen about 17 doctors, poor child had been diagnosed, and mom, bless her heart, went through all his medical records, and long story short, put it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT said, hey, this is tethered core syndrome. And it was really cool to see how AI is being used. And then I'm just going to fly through the first couple of slides just quickly. The impact of AI in healthcare, you guys know, there's different ways of using it. We got personalized patient care, help us predict missed appointments and help those patients actually see us. There's obviously tons of different companies already doing predictive analytics. My favorite is New York Tron, how they're using it, and this one is showing CHI, helping with stroke detection and identifying sepsis risk. Other platforms out there, there's a zillion, but obviously AI helping at the bedside, helping us with diagnosis, as we just kind of heard, different ways of doing that. Jefferson Health is using digital health tools and combining it with AI, again, to help our healthcare system. UPMC is personalizing our patient care, using, again, just this AI technology, being able to interact with the transcription. When you look at this keyboard and you hate how you see your doctor kind of his body turned away, or the healthcare provider, there's no reason why not we should be able to use AI to be able to capture all those thoughts and everything, so that the doctor can actually look at the patient and be able to catch all these things that maybe during the interview, maybe the patient is saying X and Y, but if you're looking away, you may not catch that subtlety in their eyes or body mannerism. And so, this whole thing of AI, everybody's like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And just to point out, some of you guys have seen something like this, but the Gartner hype cycle, where are we? Is AI just kind of that initial trigger when OpenAI said, hey, we got this thing called ChatGPT? Are we at the very top, or kind of we're at the bottom, or are we done with this? Depending on the vertical, depending how you see AI, this cycle really applies to healthcare, and just you'll see radiology where it may be at another place, but you'll maybe see family practice or pediatrics and AI at another place, meaning the way AI is being FDA approved, there's so many more applications right now in radiology. I think in the next year or so, we're going to start seeing way more now in other verticals in healthcare. And so I'd like showing this just real quick, because everyone's so stoked about AI, and Amara's law basically is saying, at the beginning, we're going to overestimate the things that AI can possibly do. But then long term, we're saying, oh, it's probably going to underestimate what it really can do. So it's really hard with AI changing literally every day. It's really hard to guess where exactly are we going to be. But I like pointing that out just because, again, when you look at all these models, we got so many. Literally, this is a cool chart that shows the size of ChatGPT 4. But as you know, Amazon came out with stuff. Google's coming out with this thing called Gemini, and I cannot wait for that in healthcare. I think that's going to I'm biased. I think that's going to beat ChatGPT 4, but we will see. But then you see all these little smaller models like Claude 2 and Palm 2, and you see llama and inflection, but the skinny is this: we have lots of choices, and depending on what your needs are, what your goals are, you may not need this big ChatGPT 4. You may be able to get away with a small model like llama. So this will be the fun part in the next year. Now I'm gonna just from 10,000 feet explain this slide and just kind of work with me here. So imagine in any vertical that you're in, obviously everybody here is in healthcare. So imagine we ask a question, and it's the average human being. It's that little red blip in the bottom. And then that's the ranking, that the quality it got, the average. And then let's just ask a human expert. So I'm a doctor, so that would be my response. And that'd be everybody ranking me. Excuse me. Then that green would be ChatGPT's example of that same question, and the quality is way higher than me. But then if you add myself plus ChatGPT together, look at that red bump. Look how much improved and higher intense, and it's actually going to the right. So big picture, I really think that's what's going to happen. It's not just the doctor. It's not just AI. It's going to be AI plus the doctor. It's going to be better than just the doctor. And that is going to be better than just the AI. You know, when I look back at my medical training, I've been out for over 20 years, and I'm like, man, with the amount of information that's coming, newer studies are saying now that medical knowledge doubles every 30 days. And there's no way I could keep up. There's a lot of studies out there that say that I would basically have to read for about 21 hours every single day just to keep up. And so obviously the amount of information is coming is huge. And my thing is, let's use AI to kind of help us to get to that next level. I won't go into this video, but the skinny is pretty cool. When ChatGPT 4 was announced roughly in March, I said, oh, that's too loud. But basically, he drew on a napkin a website, and then ChatGPT was able to create that website. So I thought that was pretty neat. Sorry about that. And so the next part is, you know, there's so many tools out there, and I just kind of wanted to show you just a quick little tiny picture of what's coming. But ironically, this individual drew this picture on the left, and look how nice it looks on the right. And so if I was on the website, I could literally drag this sun around and it would change the picture in real time. And just to show you that little proof of concept, what does that mean? In the near future, I'll be able to create discharge instructions for my patients in real time, and I'll be able to show illustrations. And I'll go to that in a little bit later. Why am I so stoked about ChatGPT? Is this slide right here. The average IQ of ChatGPT, according to Scientific America, and again, this is ChatGPT 4, and now it's been improved. At that time, it was 155. And so what does that mean? Well, if you look at the general population, you look at this slide, you're seeing like most of the people are falling between 90 and 110. But ChatGPT is already at 155. To give you a little reference point, Albert Einstein is said to be about 160, 165, Elon Musk, somewhere around there. I always joke and tell people, well, having a higher IQ doesn't necessarily mean that's a good thing. The Unabomber was around 180. And so for better or worse, I'll let you guys decide. But my point is this. ChatGPT 4, we're looking at high IQ. As this thing continues, it's estimated to hit 180. And I think by the time 3-4 years from now, I think we'll be seeing 240, 250. And my point is this, it's going to get to a level where no human being will be able to say, you know what, ChatGPT or this GPT is hallucinating, because we really won't know. We will need other AIs to check on that AI to see if it's even close or if it's correct. And so, you know, in healthcare, we all talk about like, hey, this is coming out. This is great. I was blessed to be the first person to write a book on ChatGPT in healthcare last year. And this is like the main driving point. You know, we talk about supervised learning and these models being trained, and there's all this errors in it. Well, when it was trained, it wasn't like doctors were training it. These were individuals. There's rumors that they said they were paying like $1 an hour to people in Africa to look at these outputs from ChatGPT and help reinforce the model. But my angle is this: we need to create another LLM that is more focused on healthcare, perhaps using database more that is focused on like your clinical hospital data. But then we need to use doctor in the loop, a human in the loop, and that person has to be a doctor, and not just any doctor. If I'm working on an LLM, I'm an ER doctor, then I should be working on an LLM just in ER so that I can look at it and use my 20 years of experience and say, yeah, this is right, this is wrong, and reinforce the model and improve it. Now, if they say, hey, Harvey, we got a surgery LLM we want you to work on, I mean, I'm really limited. Maybe I could do emergency surgery stuff, but the real nuts and bolts of that LLM needs to be the right doctor. And so, you know, one of the things that brings that's really dear to my heart is this right here. As an ER doctor, you know, when seconds count, I don't have much time, but I want to make sure my empathy is there. I really want to make sure I'm spending time with my patients. I want to make sure that when I speak to them, that they understand. But often enough, when I talk to patients, I try my best to break it down as best as possible. But a lot of times they are worried to either insult the doctor and say, hey, I didn't understand, or maybe they're just shy. I don't know. So I thought, you know, what we need to do is just create a bot. Now, this was just for demonstration purposes. I went ahead and got on ChatGPT and said, hey, let's create this medical helper. And the skinny is, it's just a bot. Anyone here can create the same thing. And then the skinny is, my thought was, it'd be kind of cool to have this bot at the doctor's office. And so if the patient doesn't understand, they go in the bot, or if they are getting information, they're like, I don't know what to ask. And so then the bot could help them and be this middleman to help, or woman or bot, whatever you want to call it, to help you during the communication. So I thought that'd be really neat. As we move forward, I'm encouraging my patients. I'm like, look, I see nothing wrong with bringing your computer, bringing your phone, bringing this ChatGPT, and let's work together. So I think in the near future, we're going to start seeing healthcare providers working with our patients. Everybody knows that, you know, when I started training, everybody hated hearing Dr. Google's coming, and now it's here. You know, it's going to be Dr. GPT is here. And we needed to learn how to work with our patients, tell them the good, the bad, the ugly, why it hallucinates, maybe why they shouldn't use it. And if they are going to use it, then let's use it together so that I can supervise that output and I can tell them why this was right or wrong. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a great tool. And as we start working on the hallucinations and issues of this AI, we'll be able to use it better. But I think at the end of the day, just being able to create better discharge instructions, better comprehensive approach of healthcare, I think that's the key. And so in my opinion, if I say I was a diabetic doctor and I wanted to use AI, I would use my website, go through it, and then just start translating it and making it really the correct words, the correct tone, and improving it for my patients. Now, this is probably one of my favorite slides. The skinny is this. This hospital system out of England basically used ChatGPT. As we know that when we have discharge instructions, our goal is there's certain goals. We want them to, in pediatrics, we want to make sure they're using the inhaler correctly. We want to make sure that they're preventing the disease. And so there's some core things that are in their discharge instructions. And so what they did is they fed their current discharge instructions and said, hey, change this because this one is a 5-year-old. And then it changed the words. And then it took those core vertical things that I just mentioned about these core concepts, and then they put it into a Dolly to make a coloring book. And then the child, when they left, they got actually a coloring book. And I thought, man, this is kind of cool, because now our nurses can sit down, and I know we're busy, but in theory, we could sit down and color with the child. We can explain, the parents can do that. Now that child can really look at the coloring book and kind of explore and understand and really understand the disease. So I'm really stoked about this type of technology and how it's moving forward. Now, I know I've said all these great things about it, but obviously we all know this thing hallucinates. The data is out of date. If you use the latest ChatGPT, it's been updated through April of 2023. But with that said, it's got some inaccuracies and misjudgments. So if it does these things and we're basing our clinical judgment on it, then we're going to make mistakes. Obviously, there's tons of biases in GPT. If someone in Africa or Europe wants to use GPT, some of the stuff that's in there will not apply to their area. So we need to try our best to fix these biases and do something called federated learning and use our local data so that we can address those biases and be able to understand. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, clinicians need to know this algorithm. And my thing is, we need to start having little food labels on our LLM so that doctors or healthcare providers can pick up an LLM and say, okay, this is good, bad, okay, wasn't trained on this data. So they really understand how to use that as a tool. Obviously, this thing is really expensive. There's rumors that it's between $700,000 and $800,000 a day to run this. And then the last point I want to make is, I'm from an ethical point of view, I'm a little worried, and this combines that longevity bullet there, is that I really think that with time, our healthcare IQ will only go up. And as this goes up, then we're going to start seeing that we're going to improve our quality of life. We're going to live longer. But then what if I said ChatGPT tomorrow, it's $1,000 a month, and all these people are not able to use it, and then the use starts going down? Then in theory, that could decrease people's life expectancy just because there's that correlation. And then there's this next issue, it's kind of like doctors can get sued for using it, but at the same time, doctors can be sued for not using it. And I really think that's going to be an issue in 2024. There's certain verticals, like I mentioned, radiology, it's really advanced. where I really can see a lawyer saying, hey, my patient across the street didn't have this technology. As a result, this technology, there's one really cool one that I saw that's basically lets you, the AI read the CAT scan for any stroke-like patients. And before the human has read it, the radiologist, it sends a text to the radiologist to read it fast and the ER doc to say, hey, this patient's possibly a stroke. But my point is this, if a lawyer can prove that, hey, you guys didn't have this AI and this is quote unquote the standard of care, we're going to start seeing lawsuits. But then on the other side of that, doctors are being shoved AI and say, here's the AI, I'm the administrator, go with it. And they're not having any say. So my big thing is let's train together. Let's educate our patients. One of the books I came out this year that I wrote, I just kind of wrote an algorithm. And my thing is we need to have more information out for our patients to tell them the scary parts and when to use it and when not to use it. You know, other things I want to just chat real quickly is the bad on ChatGPT. We know that this isn't HIPAA compliant and you can try your best to make it HIPAA compliant. So there's ways to do that. But at the end of the day, we need to be careful. The famous story for the year would be the lawyer story of the Samsung, but I'm going to go with the Samsung issue. This poor guy in Samsung was working on some intellectual property and software program for Samsung, and didn't realize that he needed help with the algorithm that he was working on, the software, and plugged it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gave him advice. But when he did that, he basically gave all this IP information to ChatGPT. So we need to be careful with that. The last thing I'm also worried about is this overuse of technology. You know, I have 20 years experience and I've said it multiple times, but I'm just driving the point that it's easier for me to determine when I see hallucination or not versus someone that just maybe graduated that's still going through residency or still going through training or is in that first 2 years out of residency. And I worry that there's going to be this overabundance use of technology. One of the simple things I always give a comparison is, bless you, is that I see people with,
No.
I see people with,
excuse me. Sorry about that.
okay. It's okay. I see people from other countries using CAT scans less because they're really working on that physical exam. They're looking at that history and that overuse. I just can't say enough how much I'm worried about that's coming. The other big thing is, you know, people are like, well, ChatGPT doesn't give you references. Well, I'm going to point out Perplexity and Bing Chat to some degree. If you ask for it, it will show you. In the near future, we're going to start seeing the explainability in our LLMs, and especially us healthcare providers, if we're making a decision to show us how it got to that point. And they're already working on things like that. The last thing on this, I always talk about the unknown. You know, I personally am thinking, you know, places like developing countries like Africa, I see them doing certain things in LLM a lot faster than here in the United States. Let me explain. Quickly, the skinny is this. If we have if you were running Nigeria, let's say, and you knew that there's parts of the world, parts of your country that did not have access to healthcare, you might elect to say, you know what, I'm going to use LLM. I'm going to have a provider. I'm going to use the satellites from Elon Musk and go into a remote area. And I'm going to set up areas where patients can come, use the computers through their voice and have interviews, and then have the LLM with the PA combined to say, hey, this is correct or not. Things like that, we're going to start seeing different ways of using AI in healthcare that we didn't here in the United States. Another thing that I'm really stoked about is this multimodality. I could take a picture and it could analyze the picture and then give me a diagnosis, and I'll give you some quick slides. This other thing is really cool. Meta now, based on your fMRI activity, can take these impulses and analyze what you're thinking. And then this is it. So say I put this airplane on the left that you see here in my view, my brain would be sending out these waves. And then the picture on the right is what the AI is detecting. So I think these kind of things are just going to be huge, especially in our Parkinson's patients, our stroke patients, mental health, obviously the military being able to use this type of technology. I joked and say, hey, this is only for medical use, so don't try this at home. Just to kind of show you proof of concept if someone's not seen this yet. For example, in Lyme's disease, you know, if you're used to seeing this clinical vignette where a patient takes a tick off and then all of a sudden it has a rash. Well, that's Lyme disease. And so I put the picture. Now, all the pictures I used were on the internet. They had, they were allowed to do this and all that stuff. So I just wasn't sure. I kind of just took whatever. No, these were with permission. The other one is this kind of cool. I just took 4 different pills and I took pictures of them and I said, hey, what is this? Of the 4 pills, it identified one correctly, and that was great. But the other one that it did identify, totally butchered it. It said it was a narcotic and it wasn't. And then the other 2 had no clue. It just says, I don't know what this is at all. And those 2 happen to be generic. With time, I think this will get better. For fun, I threw a patient saying they had cough and I asked it for a different diagnosis. And I said, here's the x-ray. And it went through and it said, hey, this is your differential diagnosis. And I thought that was kind of cool. As an ER doctor, I had to throw an EKG just for fun. And it said, yeah, this is VTAC. And it kind of read like a med student, which was kind of cool. And so I wanted to end with this. If you have any questions, I have an AI healthcare course. I have these free cheat sheets and GPT cheat sheets in healthcare. And then last thing I wanted to say, I have this really cool geeky thing that I did. I cloned my voice. I cloned my business partner's voice. I find medical journal stuff or blogs that I like. I enter it into ChatGPT. ChatGPT creates this conversation. And then from there, it takes our voices and then spits it out. And it creates a picture of that as a blog. And then it also creates the file and it's a podcast. And within 5 minutes, I have my own podcast, which is pretty cool. So anyway, so I hope that was good. I know that was kind of fast, but I wanted to make sure I left some time to kind of chat. So thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Castro. That was great. What as you said, you kind of had to rifle through that pretty quickly, but what do you see as kind of the biggest opportunity that's available today, given what the status of things is?
You know, at the end of the day, we have to have a human in the loop. We can't let this thing go willy-nilly and just do whatever. So I think we can start using those outputs to help us. Like I mentioned, like the discharge instructions, that's something simple. Our website, our health education information. The other thing I didn't talk about was I really think as clinicians, we get dinged on not being empathetic enough or communicating with our patient. That was one of my PowerPoints. So I really do think we can use AI to help us with, what are the top 10 things that patients hate about, that think that I'm not empathetic, and then it goes through, or help me with my vocabulary. I know medical vocabulary, but maybe there's things in my tone that I say that I can do different and I can use AI. The other thing I think we can do pretty quickly now is there's different countries that I've had to deal with as far as I used to work right by the airport and I would get people from all over the world coming to the ER, and then we didn't have the language to translate for them, and I would call the language line and all that, and we just didn't have that particular. And what was interesting is I've been going back and just seeing what languages they were, and I've been finding them on ChatGPT to use that to translate. The last thing I think real quick, and I know this is long-winded, is there's that whole cultural effect. I'm here in Texas and I may be giving Texas examples, but if I'm talking to someone out in Europe and I tell them about a Texas example, it's going to go over their head. So why not use ChatGPT to say, hey, I need an example for Europe and something that they would understand. Maybe I need to talk about soccer and then relate that to healthcare and then use that, but then AI can help me do that. So it's kind of a different way of thinking of it, but I think we can do that now.
Okay, great. Let's go to some other questions here. John?
Yeah, thank you, John. I listened with interest and great presentation. I kind of represent the brake tapping regulatory side of things, and there is obviously a very heavy, I shouldn't editorialize. There's a strong interest on the part of the federal government in particular to regulate the use of generative AI in healthcare around clinical use cases, decision support for both the Food and Drug Administration and for something that was very familiar with when I was at Cerner, the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT. And there are pending regulatory proposals that will probably be adopted that will regulate a certain segment of this topic. But I don't think they're at all done. And they look at it from questions of health equity and controlling for bias, but also for assuring, the reliability and the veracity and the competence of those who develop it. So it's not an egalitarian topic. My question really is, what's the right federal role here that doesn't get in the way, but also you're talking about development of things that currently would be classified as medical devices.
Yeah.
So it just isn't wild, wild west and any good idea. You know, all ideas have equal merit. It's something that affects people's lives and quality of care.
Yeah, no, excellent point. And I agree, FDA, obviously there's laws and there's a definition. My personal worry is not really with OpenAI or the big guys or Google. I'm more worried about the one guy that has access to an API and then says, oh, I have this great tool, and then it's selling it or trying to sell it, and then it's should be FDA approved. The other angle to this that we need to think about is hospitals don't have to go through FDA approval. You know, hospital X can go through and say, hey, I'm making this model and I'm going to shove it on my doctors, and it is what it is. And there is nothing there now. I know the AMA came out this year saying, hey, we need to have physicians involved when it comes to these LLMs and allowing them or not. This whole hallucination is a huge issue. And that's why I think personally, we need to have our own LLMs that are created with our own data and verified and all that. There's so many parts to this. So it's not so quietly can be done so easily. But with that said, I do think if ChatGPT, depending on what you're looking at and what vertical of the whole thing, it could vary with a error rate of 3%. And that's why I think having a human in the loop and the right doctor in the loop can help with that, because then the doctor will be like, oh yeah, that's BS, or no, this is correct, or no, I'm not really sure. And I see the references. Let me cross-reference this. I still think it's a good tool. I personally, if it's, 4 or 5 in the morning, I'm exhausted, it'd be nice to be able to say, okay, here are the symptoms. Here's my x-ray findings labs. Here's my differential diagnosis. Am I missing something? And it'd be like, hey, have you thought of this? And I'm like, oh yeah, I thought of it. I already went. Or if I didn't, just to be able to say, gosh, I forgot that one. Yeah, let me go back in the room and ask X, Y, or let me listen to the heart a little bit more carefully. So hopefully that answered that.
Doug?
Yeah, Dr. Castro, thank you so much. Your talk actually got me to think about discharge papers. And I have an elderly mother. She was back of discharge papers from the emergency room as well as from her doctor. And, basically she did nothing with it, right? And, so I was visiting and I took all her papers and everything, and I was looking through everything. My fundamental question is, how many patients look at their discharge papers? So doctors, the hospital system's giving a bunch of information, overwhelming, especially if you're elderly, if you have low literacy rate, you're struggling with this. So one question is, has anyone done studies on, are people doing anything with these 10 pages of discharge paper? What part of that discharge has any value whatsoever? In fact, I went through and graded what I thought was areas. My mother had the low sodium, and yet they said to be on a low sodium diet. In fact, that was one of the reasons she went to the emergency room, because they, but her discharge paper was saying one thing, and she lost 10 pounds in a month, but they were saying, no, watch what you're eating, because her BMI was at 25.2 or something like that. So, it's kind of like, these are boilerplate documents that are just generated, and yet, at the end of the day, are they doing anything for the patient? Is, I guess, my question.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'm sure there's some studies out there, and I'm sure you've seen some from what's going on with your mom. And I'm sorry to hear about that, about your mom. That's the whole point of this whole conversation. I think we need tools to make us better. I think we're using these boilerplates and saying, here, generic discharge, and we're not really customizing it. My whole thing is we need that doctor in the loop in this. So your case with your mom, how nice would it be? I don't know if Epic is already doing this, but how nice would it be if I could discharge you and then customize the discharge instructions for your mom? And then, the doctor should read them. Because I know a lot of times it's just like, oh yeah, they're diabetic, low potassium or whatever. And then I just click, and then like, here you go, send and done. But this is where the human, no matter what, should look at them and say, wait, this was wrong. And that should have been caught at the hospital system. Not blaming the nurse. I'm going to blame the doctor on that, because at the end of the day, the doctor should read what he wrote or she wrote. But yeah, no, a great point. And that's exactly, I really think this is something that we're going to start seeing. And I know Epic is already working with OpenAI, and I'm trying to get a hold of some doctors that have access to this new Epic to see what they think.
Yeah, by the way, the health system solved my mom's problem. She's doing great. So
Okay,
at the end of the day, the health system works. It's just sometimes the process is painful.
Agreed.
And how do you optimize for that? So thank you.
I think the personalization aspect that you mentioned, Dr. Castro, is really vital. You could get rid of a lot of extraneous materials and be more accurate at the same time.
Agreed.
Other questions? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you, Doctor. Excellent presentation. Just two comments and one response to Doug's situation. Your comment and your focus on having to localize to different cultures and languages, and including things like, religious preferences. When, in the hospitals, when I was a hospital nurse, we had to be extremely aware of people's cultural experiences. Like if somebody died, you couldn't touch them with a pair of scissors or things like that. So that's incredibly important because we still localize IT. So when we come up with a solution, we have to localize it to a current culture. So that's a big ask, I think, in AI, but it's something that we have to address. So we're not doing the generic sort of instructions, including discharge planning. And just to that comment, I think, again, you spoke about we will always need human intervention. So even if we improve, or when we improve, not if we improve, but when we improve discharge planning and summaries, being able to spend the time with the patient and the carer or whoever that team is going to be is important, that they actually understand what's written. And, that you can nail it down to you have to do this and you have to do that. And do you understand? Do you have any question? Because a lot of times they don't take the time to do that. And I know that's really important when we're taking, especially in, we did a lot of that in case management, we still do. And, all of us sitting here are professionals. We have a huge interest in all sorts of various aspects of technology and AI and so on and so forth. But, I still think the conundrum is educating the public and the patients. So, when Bill was talking earlier about, what's going on over at Children's Mercy, the understanding, or probably not the right word, but making sure that a parent understands that, yes, while AI has contributed to making a proper diagnosis for my child, it's still the doctor and the team that is finalizing that. So the education of the public, I think, is one of our biggest, if not our biggest challenge overall. We had to do that with patient-centered care and patient choice, sharing of medical records and EHRs and all of that. And this is going to be this is a Mount Everest that we have to.
Yeah.
So I'm attending EMIS next week, so I hope to see you there.
Oh, awesome. I'll see you there. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Other questions for Dr. Castro? Okay, well, let's leave it at that then. Dr. Castro, it's really great to kind of get up to date on what's happening in the broader marketplace, and we're very grateful for you taking the time to be with us. We tend to be a little bit more localized here, so it was good to get the broader view, and we thank you very much.
I appreciate it, guys, and I hope to see you guys all again. Thank you for your time.
Okay, take care now.
Well done.
Dr. Ader, did you have a question?
No, not really. Just an observation. I think that this was Dr. Castro has a very an excellent, I think, practical approach and to the topic. And I was just responding to the idea that I think when probably the most common thing that is said between patients and their family members when they leave the doctor's office is, what did they say? And I really believe that this has a great potential for improving healthcare literacy at the point of care. And I think, Doug, you mentioned some of those concepts that we've all experienced it. And Dr. Castro's comment about the Epic generates 15-page patient information with a lot of boilerplate, a lot of regulatory stuff. And it's basically impenetrable, I think, for most of our our customers, and in fact probably does harm as far as just confusing them. What happened? So really love the practical aspects that we could potentially address with this technology.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Rader. Anything else in closing? I would also direct you to the chat before we sign off. Kind of a nice note from Zach Gardner about an AI project they've got going on, so you can check for the link there, and welcome you to participate. But let's sign off for today and say thank you very much to our presenters and for all of you for the time that you give to this, and we certainly appreciate your input and feedback. So thanks so much. Bye now.
Thank you.
Great week.
Great.